Good evening, and thank you for joining us for Women Entrepreneurs Innovation, Flavor, and Spice. My name is Louisa. I am part of the team here at the Chinese American Museum in Washington, D.C. We are the first and only museum in our nation's capital celebrating the history, culture, and contributions of Chinese Americans in our nation and around the world. The Women Entrepreneurs series is sponsored by Tim Xu and James Xu of Evergreen Enterprises, and we have an inspiring lineup of business women here today. We're all very excited to have all of you. And to lead our discussion this evening is Milan Tran. And Milan is the executive director at the Virginian Asian Chamber of Commerce, the voice of Asian American business. At the State Asian Chamber, Milan develops entrepreneurship curriculum and creates partnerships with local, regional, state, national, and global partners. She represents the State Asian Chamber on all Virginia's major and regional economic development projects. She collaborates with the private sector, Fortune 100, local, state, and federal governments, NGOs, international economic development associations, Asian embassies, and international diaspora communities. Milan is the recipient of numerous awards for leadership from the U.S. Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and various military branches for her extensive service to U.S. veterans. She is also a two-time National Business Award winner from U.S. Small Business Administration, and she brings the passion of service using her 40 years of senior management to benefit and give back to the community she loves. And we're really happy to have you here and leading this discussion. I would also just like to make one little housekeeping note. Our chat and Q&A is available at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions throughout the program, please feel free to jot them down and we'll do our best to get to them. And Milan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, the History Museum, Chinese American Museum. My name is Milan Tran. I'm here to host a very interesting dialogue with four passionate entrepreneurs. Before I say anything, I just want to thank again the museum for showcasing the beauty of the entrepreneurship and especially of those with heritage from China. First, I'd like to do a little overview. I will introduce four of our panelists and with 5 elements of their background. I will then ask them to talk a little bit about themselves. But in front of you, you will see Miss Victoria with Ice Cream Jubilee. You see Nona Lim. You see Jing Gao. You see NOMAD dumpling by Kevin and Susan on your screen. What I would like to do is to introduce each of the person by their ranking order of alphabetical. So I have Ms. Jing Gao. She is the CEO founder of the Fly by Jing. Her origin is from Chengdu, Sichuan, and her product of industry is direct to consumer, packaged brands. The second person I have in front of me is Ms. Kevin Hoffner and Susan Zhu. They co-own a company, and the company produce consumer packaged goods. Kevin is the CEO, and Susan is the Chief Strategist Officer. Nona Lim of Nona Lim Company is a CEO founder based in Oakland, California. She produced Asian consumer packaged goods brand. Each of them so far have you seen is mostly in the consumer packaged brands business of production. The last person I have is Miss Victoria Lai. She is the CEO. She does ice cream, making ice cream. The company name is called Icecreampreneur. Interesting, where she produce and sell to Costco in DC area, as well as in Pennsylvania and Ohio, as well as some retails. So 4 passionate entrepreneurs with 4 different kind of products, but coming into the same type of new consumer to business brand. and it's a very interesting story. So I have a set of questions I would like to ask my panelists. First of all, I'd like to ask each panelist to please talk a little bit about your unique background and how do you come about to run your business. I start with Ms. Jing Gao.
Thank you very much. It's great to meet everyone. I'm Jing, the founder of Fly by Jing. I was actually born in Chengdu, and I grew up moving around a lot with my parents' jobs. So we moved to 8 different countries before I was even in high school. So growing up, I was constantly, trying to fit into new cultures and new environments, and I didn't. To me, that was the norm. And I didn't realize until much later just how disconnected I had become from my Chinese heritage. In my 20s, with a job, I used to work in tech. I moved to Asia and spent time in Beijing and Singapore and in Shanghai for about 10 years. And it was there that I finally started to reconnect with my heritage. And I was able to do so mainly through food. So as I was discovering this, 5,000-year heritage, culinary heritage, and just completely enamored by the flavors, I realized how few of these flavors actually ever made their way to the West. And so it started as a personal quest to reconnect with my roots, and it became a journey to really try to shine a light on this incredible culinary heritage and try to make these flavors more accessible to others. So along that journey, I opened a couple of restaurants in Shanghai and in Chengdu, and Fly by Jing was born from that. It started as an underground supper club, and in 2018, when I traveled to the US and visited Expo West and realized how few options there were for Asian foods. I remember that Nona Lim, I actually met Nona briefly at that point, and her brand was one of the only brands in this space. So I was really inspired to take the flavors that I was creating in my kitchen and make it more accessible to everyone. And so Fly by Jing, as a sauce and condiments company, was born, and we initially launched in 2018 via a Kickstarter. When that did well, I was able to produce the first big batch at scale and moved my life from China to Los Angeles, where now the company is based. We've been growing very rapidly over the last 2.5 years, and are about to enter retail as well into like Whole Foods and Target and Costco. So we're really excited to continue spreading the gospel of Sichuan flavors in the US.
Thank you very much. That's a fascinating story. So I'd like to ask all panelists to talk about their background a little bit, just kind of introducing where you are at with your company. And then throughout the interview, we would love for you to dig into more onto your brand and the details of how the production and the formation of your enterprise. Next, I'd love to hear more on the story of Karen and Susan, NOMAD Dumpling. How did you come about, and a little bit about your personal background? Let's start with Karen.
Okay, hi. Well, thank you so much for having us. We're very excited to be here today. My name is Karen, and I'm a founder of NOMAD Dumplings. And for over a decade, I've worked in the food and beverage industry in the US and in China. And this is my partner, Susan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Zhu, super excited to be here. So thank you so much for having us. I lead strategy for NOMAD Dumplings, and I grew up in China. I was born in China, and I grew up here in New York. And I had a fun story that I wanted to share about Karen and I. We actually met in first grade. That's where we became friends. And I actually taught Karen how to count in Mandarin during recess class. I also introduced Karen to spicy Chinese food. So one night, Karen comes over for dinner, and my mom, being from Chongqing, made this incredibly spicy dish that was bright red. Karen hadn't been exposed to that much spicy food at the time, so she takes a huge mouthful of it, thinking that it's ketchup. So you can imagine her reaction.
It was bad. I remember your mom running to get milk. And that was one of probably my favorite food memories from being a child. And since then, I have grown to love spicy food. You know, today I realize that I'm the only Caucasian woman on this panel, and I realize that that might be confusing and complicated to some of the viewers here. And I just want to share that my intent here and my intent with NOMAD is to share some of the memories that I've been lucky enough to have working in China and growing up, being friends with people like Susan. And I feel so honored to be sitting on this panel with women that I respect so greatly. I just want to say thank you so much for having us here today.
Fascinating story. And in fact, that aspect of global, you can't escape. In fact, within our own Asian world, we also need some diversity in there too. So we welcome globalism in entrepreneurship. So with that, talking about globalism, let's talk about Singapore. How about Nona Lim's story? I think you're mute.
Thank you. Always forget that, you know, after a year and a half of Zooming, you think I would know better. But
Yeah,
thank you for having me. So I grew up in Singapore, you know, spent the first kind of 2 decades growing and studying there. And I, you know, like most Singaporeans, we are incredibly passionate about food. You know, we love the hawker centers. And I used to grow up next to one in Old Airport Road, which is actually the hawker center that was featured in Crazy Rich Asians, if you watched that movie. And I remember going there as a child with my dad, always watching intently, you know, the hawker store, seeing whether it is the Indian guy spinning roti prata or having a big black wok cooking a char kway teow. That's what I grew up looking, eating, just learning, right? Fast forward, I spent the last 2 decades actually in London and in the Bay Area, not so much in food. I ended up being in management consulting and actually also in software consulting before starting my food company. I'm sure we'll get to that in the next few questions, but it's kind of fun to see how all our backgrounds didn't quite start from food necessarily.
Just like a career, right? You start somewhere and then you end up somewhere else. So, yes, great story. Victoria, I would love to hear more about how did it all start with Ice Cream Jubilee, Victoria?
You're mute.
Thank you for having me. Well, I started Ice Cream Jubilee in 2014 in Washington, D.C. Actually, I started a few years before that as a blog and sort of a passion project, just to get my creative juices flowing. I sort of made a pact to myself. You know how people say like, oh, I'm gonna run 3 miles every single day until like I can run 5 miles and then until I can run a marathon. I said I was gonna make 4 flavors every single week and blog about them and photograph them and until I'm tired of ice cream. And I never got tired of ice cream. So I ended up leaving my, my job. I was a presidential appointee actually at the Department of Homeland Security, where I was working as a lawyer. And that was a dream job of mine. So I left that for another dream job, which was opening up Ice Cream Jubilee in the Navy Yard neighborhood of Washington, D.C. by the baseball stadium. And now I have 3 locations and I'm distributed through the Mid-Atlantic through Whole Foods and a vibrant direct-to-consumer shipping business. So we're distribution, manufacturing, retail, you know, customer service, put the sprinkles on top, the whole 9 yards, and it's a lot of fun.
Wow. So without the Chinese history of museum, I would not have dwelled myself into studying a little bit more about the industry and the food production that you ladies are brave enough to enter, let alone talking about the marketing and the competitive market out there. So my set of questions in the next few, maybe 40 minutes or so, will be very specific. I asked you entrepreneurs to, when I asked the question, to frame your answer specifically to my question, because all the questions are related to each other. So don't go too far, too much. Wait until the next question so we can have the whole picture. So question number 1 is for Jing. What is your brand and who is your market specifically? Jing?
I would say Fly by Jing is a premium, all natural and small batch crafted condiments company. inspired by my hometown, the flavors of my hometown, Chengdu. Apologies for my internet being a little bit shaky. I think that, you know, we want to create space for more diversity to exist in the natural foods industry by telling a very personal story, a very personal journey to this product's creation, and to show that, you know, Chinese food, Asian food, even something as specific as Sichuan food is not a monolith, and there's many, many different layers and many different stories deserve to be told. And so we are telling ours through our sauces.
Who is your market?
Who is our market? Yeah, so I think it's, yeah, I think who enjoy flavor. I think it's quite broad. I think that we've seen that reflected in our consumer base. There is no specific ethnic group that over-indexes. It's quite representative of the cross-section of ethnicities in the US. I do think that it is, you know, it skews slightly more, you know, highly educated and a higher household income, but pretty evenly split between male and female. And I think it's really just people who are curious and, you know, who enjoy flavor, enjoy, you know, life. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's a great answer. Okay, so that is your first question. I'm going to ask Ms. Karen and Susan to answer the same question. What is your brand and what is your market?
Great. So our brand NOMAD is focused on regionally inspired, fun, colorful dumplings. And we actually came up with the name NOMAD because we had this vision of a traveler wandering around the world, trying different regional flavors and bring them back inside the bite of a dumpling. So in addition to that narrative, sustainability is also a really important part of our brand, as we care a lot about our impact on our environment. And as such, we have made decisions such as producing in a solar-powered facility, sourcing our packaging from recycled materials, and also using sustainable ingredients. In fact, we continue to evolve our brand to be even more sustainable and are currently in the process of transitioning to be 100% plant-based. And then to answer the second part of your question about our market, we serve two core customer markets. So our first group of customers are ones that are really health conscious and are looking for plant-based foods. And our second group of customers are ones that are just looking for a really simple and fun food.
It seemed to be simple, but a lot of thoughts have been put in it, I bet you. Mm-hmm. The next one, Nona Lim, same question, brand and market.
Yeah, so I started the business in 2014, you know, and I think as Jing mentioned, definitely there were not a lot of food companies started by BIPOC female founders. And at that time, it was all about bringing all these incredible flavors that I grew up with, you know, to, I would say, to America, to mainstream Americans, and to make it convenient and accessible, right? And so I did start the company to want to redefine it, because I think that at that time, you know, Asian packaged food had the, probably had the perception that it's either very cheap or it's not very good for you in a lot of instances. And I wanted to show that it is actually possible to create products that taste great, or on the other, you know, taste great, number one, but number two, made with clean label ingredients, and number three, be accessible, right? Because otherwise, you know, a lot of times, some of the Asian packaged food that you get might be in languages that's not very approachable, without any instructions or any pictures, so you don't really know what to do with it. Or, you know, there might be a lot of additives or things that I wouldn't feel comfortable eating on a daily basis, especially because I was also a competitive fencer at that time, representing Singaporean fencing. And I wanted to make sure that, you know, whatever that I eat would help me in my recovery and would help me in my performance. So that's why I had a lot of the, what I call the West Coast attention to details, to the ingredients in the food that we make. In terms of who our customers are, you know, we call her Christina, right? We've done some market research, and based on our market research, she is a 38-year-old millennial mom, college educated, annual household income over $100,000, pretty well traveled, and traveling less now, perhaps because of COVID or perhaps because she has young family, so now she may actually be eating more chicken noodle soup than pho, but she wants to ramp up her repertoire. So what we try to do is actually to make it easy for her to relieve some of her kind of more culinary experiences. And so from that perspective, about 20% of our consumers are Asian Americans, which indexes much higher than, kind of the US population. But we actually do have a lot of consumers, I would say, over 60% of them are probably non-Asians, right? They're probably the white Americans, etc. And then we do have a mix of Hispanic and Black Americans as well as our consumers.
Thank you very much. Great lesson on productivity and the connection between quality, packaging, and instructions. So finally is Victoria. Victoria's story about your brand and your market, please.
So Ice Cream Jubilee is all about joy. I mean, I called Ice Cream Jubilee because it's impossible to say the word Jubilee without smiling. And of course, when you say ice cream, your face lights up, or at least mine does. So I started an ice cream company because it was always a source of creativity and joy. And it's something that I remembered as a happy memory with my family. And the more people I spoke with, the more I recognized that every single one of us has a happy memory of ice cream. And I love the idea of bringing all those happy memories as the thing that connects strangers to strangers to strangers. So our flavors at Ice Cream Jubilee are derived sort of in three main buckets. We have nostalgic flavors like cookies and cookie dough, our top seller, which is very delicious. But at the same time, this is matcha green tea is another one of our flavors that's also available in Whole Foods. So pairing those up and letting people have a taste of the nostalgia, maybe the like my Texas upbringing, the ice cream that I grew up having, but also with the flavors that could be new or could be nostalgic to an Asian American person growing up. We also have a red bean almond cookie and a citrus Szechuan peppercorn. Those sorts of flavors, letting people try something new. And then our third silo of flavors are boozy flavors, just because craft cocktails are so fun and it's a great flavor to mix with ice cream. Now, our target customer is quite broad because because everybody loves ice cream, frankly, and everybody derives joy from ice cream. So we have our super premium ice cream, which is 16% butterfat, from which all our flavors just taste pure. They pop a lot more. So we have health conscious people who want to stay all natural, but don't mind indulging in a premium product. And either they're bringing in their parents visiting them from out of town, or they're bringing their children that they've had, or they're having a girls' night out or a first date. And everybody comes by to either try something new or have their the favorite flavor that they get every single time.
Excellent. So the brand seemed to also define the market. So the next question I know you all will enjoy answering, and that is the question about how did you come up with this concept? So the question has two parts. Part number one, please offer the audience on the nature of how you start your journey in regards to the production of your particular product. How did it evolve? How did it grow? Is it still growing? And maybe the vision of the future. And who else in your team that helped you make it a success? All right, so let's go over again with Jing. Jing, how did you start? How did you grow? Is it still growing? And who in your teams contributed to your success?
Yeah, so we started, it was just a one-person operation. I was, cooking dinners and it was a supper club, pop-up dining concept. I was traveling to cities all over the world, and everywhere I went, I had to carry suitcases of ingredients with me because these were extremely specific ingredients sourced in Sichuan that were inaccessible pretty much anywhere else. And through doing that and cooking for literally, you know, hundreds of people and seeing the firsthand feedback when they tasted the flavors and understanding that these flavors were universal. However, they had just never heard of the ingredients, never could access the ingredients. That, you know, inspired in me to try to isolate some of these flavor bases that were in my dinners. And it just so happened that some of them, most of them were shelf staple, like the chili sauce, the, you know, the dumpling sauces and the spice mixes. And so it started out as me just, you know, bottling it and giving it to friends in Shanghai. And then I started selling it in Shanghai. And when I decided to launch in the US, I decided to do so through Kickstarter, because just to gauge the interest in something like this. And, you know, I felt like the US market was ready for a new paradigm about Chinese food, that it doesn't have to be considered, you know, dirty, cheap, unhealthy. It can be some of the highest quality products that you can find anywhere. And that, you know, was confirmed when the Kickstarter did do really well. But that became, you know, another, you know, different and extremely challenging journey to create these and maintain the level of quality and flavor at scale. So that was several months of like just harrowing experience at the factories, trying to convince factories to work with me when, you know, I was a nobody, and they were doing things their own way for many, many years, and there was no incentive for them to work with you know, a newcomer. But, you know, just I think the blind persistence is what got us to where we are today. You know, I was able to create the first big batch at scale and to, you know, the quality standards that I had. And then, you know, moving to the US, it was the first probably year and a half, it was still just me working on this as well. So, you know, extremely resource constrained, which, you know, looking back, I think I am actually quite grateful for, because it really forced me to think more creatively about, you know, ways to grow. And, you know, so we were bootstrapped from the beginning, other than the Kickstarter funding, which was just prepayment for the products. And, you know, we grew very organically and through word of mouth and through our customers who loved the product right away. But really last year during pandemic was kind of our biggest growth spurt. And we had a ton of press coverage, which, you know, resulted in the most demand we've ever received, but also incredible logistics challenges and delays in production. But as a result of that rapid growth, we've been able to grow our team. And so today, exactly a year after we hired our first employee, we are now almost 10 people. And it's, yeah, it's everybody's willingness to pitch in and wear a multitude of different hats. And I think I credit like all of our success today to the culture of our team.
Excellent. That's a fabulous story. I really admire you. That's a lot of work and patience. Next, Karen and Susan, please share with us, how did it all start?
Okay. Thank you. So I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I always loved food. You know, as a kid, I was extremely overweight, and this made growing up really challenging. But then after college, I moved to China and learned how to cook Chinese food there. And that was life-changing for me. When I moved back to New York, I actually lived just a couple blocks from Susan, and we got the inspiration to start NOMAD after visiting Whole Foods and noticing that there was no vegetarian dumplings there. I remember we were like walking on the West Side Highway, chatting about starting this. We wanted to create a line where we could kind of reminisce about all the places that we love traveling to. And in terms of a team, like we have a great team, both in sales and production. And during COVID, we had to rethink our approach, especially when it came to sales. And so we created a shared sales team. So during COVID, we noticed that a lot of buyers at grocery stores were extremely overworked. And so we want to be like the best purveyor that we could. So this meant doing our own merchandising and ensuring that ordering was going smoothly. But to do that, we needed an extended team, which we could not afford. So I reached out to my friend who started 8 Miles, and we started a shared sales team. And now that, so we could be like more efficient with our costs and things like that. And so now our shared sales team supports 5 startups, and we're growing. Thank you.
Excellent story. Excellent story. Thank you so much. Next, how about Nona Lim? Answering Singapore.
Definitely a journey and definitely evolved. So I first moved to the Bay Area in 2005, and in 2006, I actually launched the very first meal kit delivery services in the US. Technically created that category, but it was really kind of a side hustle because at the same time I was fencing competitively, representing Singapore. So I'll be training 4 or 5 times a week. And maybe going away for competitions once or twice a month. So I was doing the 2 things at the same time. Almost made the London Olympics in 2012, kind of missed the final bout by 1 point, got really upset, quit fencing, had a baby instead in 2013, and then launched the Nona Lim brand. So what I did was that initially I took some of the products, the soups that were in our meal kit program, and put them into retail stores, and had a very early partnership with Whole Foods. Had a great partnership with Whole Foods in Northern California, and they reached out to me and said, we really want to have Asian noodles, like what we see at a lot of the Asian supermarket, but we want those that are clean label. Could you please help us figure out how to do that? And so I reached back out to my roots, to Singapore. Having grown up in Singapore, we eat all kinds of noodles, right? So many different types, so many different shapes. And so at that time, I decided, I found a manufacturer in Singapore, basically a 3rd generation family-owned business that made rice noodles, where they would take, the rice, they would age it for over a year before they would even grind it and then make it, and introduce that into Whole Foods. So I kind of brought fresh Asian products into Whole Foods, and it was super exciting because it was a product that actually tasted great. It had, especially to a lot of the Asians who might be, at this panel, there's this QQ thing, right? Or the concept of having the right bite to your noodle. And I wanted to make sure that we had that. And so, so that was where I started kind of the CPG journey with rice noodles, and then brought in ramen noodles, and also a lot of the broth as well along the way. So, actually created the very first bone broth at retail, and evolved since then. I think since then we have gone into different product lines. We've started with cook at home, and then we created things that are more grab and go, like little hit and sip Asian bone broth that you could drink. And then with COVID, things pivoted. People wanted to cook at home a lot more, and now we have a lot of cook at home, like stir fry kits, things that you could actually cook with to make it even easier, so that if you don't know how to put the sauces together, you have the noodles and the sauce together in a box. So it's definitely an evolving journey. And very quickly, I guess I've had the good fortune, I suppose, of working with a lot of talented people along the way who have taught me so much. Whether it is we had VP of operations that had almost 30 years of experience in CPG, that was kind of the COO of Mighty Leaf Tea, or a VP of finance that was at Pepsi for over 15 years. So I have the pleasure to actually learn a lot about the industry just by working with really great people. I mean, right now, our team is 80% female and minority, which is awesome. And we also produce a lot of our own products still. So we do have a production team on top of our the rest of the sales and marketing and the other people who are not involved in production.
Fascinating story. Thank you so much. How about Victoria? Please share your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I got into a little bit before, I started ice cream as a passion project, and I perfected my craft just in my own apartment. When I decided that I wanted to grow a little bit more and test out my hobby, I got into a commercial kitchen. and was able to compete in a citywide competition for best ice cream. And even before I quit my job, Ice Cream Jubilee won the People's Choice for Washington, D.C.'s best ice cream in 2013.
Wow.
That in itself opened doors. There were some land developers there who said, you know, come, and we're looking for a local ice cream company to occupy our space right by the water. Have you thought about doing this full time? And I had, but I knew that retail was a difficult business, you know, one that my immigrant parents tried to get away from in pursuing professional degrees and encouraging me to do that too. But the opportunity was too perfect. I crunched the numbers, it looked all good. And I started from there. I mean, from the beginning, I was evolving. Your question's about evolving. I realized that I needed to double my staff in the first 2 days I was open. So I opened on a Thursday. By Saturday, I was having job interviews while the store was open right there, just because I needed to hire people on the spot to make it to the next weekend. You know, flash forward 7 years till today, I have, in 7 years, most of my management staff has been with me for 5 or 6 years. I owe each one of them so much for their loyalty, for their shared vision of making Ice Cream Jubilee the best ice cream in Washington, D.C., in the area, in the Mid-Atlantic, and beyond. I'm so grateful for all of them and their unique skills, not only because they teach me, but every moment that I get to come home and have dinner with my family while the ice cream shop is open and people are enjoying the flavors that I've helped create, you know, I'm extremely grateful that we have a team that can keep the operations going. Whether they are doing catering or manufacturing or distribution, heavy lifting, sales and marketing, everybody develops an expertise, and it's all driven by passion. And it just happens that that passion is ice cream.
You do a good job with promoting ice cream. I am in love with ice cream more now.
I'm in love with ice cream. It makes it easy to.
Thank you. So, ladies, we are only one third of our program. So what I would love for us to do is to make it a little bit more brief for each section, okay? But a little bit concise. So far, we have heard a lot of details about how you created the enterprise and went through the process. We are now getting a little bit more into some of the philosophical part of creating an enterprise. And that part is called branding. And I'm fascinated about the fact that in the food production, you being from China, Asia, you not only you make food, but you also are bringing that unique history, the passion, plus the innovation in collaboration with the thing called profits. You have to produce, you have to have result sales. Plus you want to bring innovation, you want to bring the history in it, sustainability, all of the things that you want it to be. So with that, how important is branding within that whole process of making reality come true, taking your history into consideration? So with that, Jing, could you please give me an overview of how important is branding? How did you market your brand and developing it and bringing it from an idea to being a reality?
Yeah, I think branding for us, for me has been extremely important from the beginning, second only to the product itself. I think, one of the things I wanted to address were the false narratives that existed about Chinese food, particularly Chinese condiments and sauces. I think for so long, there's just not, like, what I've observed is that super high quality ingredients and products from China actually never made their way to the US, mostly because manufacturers were told that people weren't willing to pay more than $2 for something that was Chinese. So there's no incentive to put anything of quality in the products. So, we made sure to start with the product first, and because of the, ultra premium ingredients and the small batch nature of our production, we had to, price it accordingly as well. And so I knew that, my background in tech, and prior to that, I worked in marketing at P&G. It's something's value is what, someone is willing to pay for it. And so a lot of people, and people for not just the product, they pay for the story and they pay for the way that the product makes them feel. And so we wanted to make sure that there's a story being told here. There is a story that's very personal as well. So we actually originally did a branding that was really eye-catching, super colorful, mainly with the purpose to, stop someone in their tracks and have them question why they expected Chinese food to look different. However, as we evolved and as the brand evolved, we actually did a rebrand last November where we were telling more of our story and our reason for being on the jar itself in preparation for going into retail when people walk down the aisle without any background on the brand. So so we did that, and our tagline on the jar is not traditional but personal, to continue to drive home that idea that there's many versions of something. And I think our branding and our storytelling is what has created such a strong community around us.
Thank you very much for a nice story. How about Karen, Susan?
So branding is a really important part of Nomad because it's how we express our vision and tell our story. And each of our dumplings has a personality. So they're hot, cool, sweet, and strong. And it's the packaging, and each dumpling, it combines a personal story and a regional flavor profile. And it's the packaging that depicts this story. For example, we have the Hunan Hottie, and the little illustrations on it have bok choy, which was the first vegetable that we learned to cook when we moved to Hunan. It has shiitake mushrooms because our Chinese teacher Dana would throw shiitake mushrooms in everything. So we had to put shiitakes in this. It also has chili peppers because Hunan is famed for its use of chili peppers, and plastic stools. So we could reminisce about the plastic stools that we used to sit on at our favorite dumpling shops. The one thing that's really important to us at Nomad is that we continue to evolve our brand strategy based on the voice of our consumers and of our retail partners. So thank you.
Excellent story. Nona, what about you? Branding?
I think branding is definitely important, although I wouldn't, I would admit that it may not have been something that I gave it as much priority when I first started the business. I think I've been really focused on the quality of the product, and I would spend a lot of time thinking not just about what would go in there, but what wouldn't go in there, right? Which just doesn't need to be there. So when we were selecting a coconut cream, you could have an organic coconut cream, but it still had preservatives. I wanted to find one that was just coconut and water. That was it. Those were the two sub-ingredients, right? So I spent so much time on the product, and we would have things like, gluten-free certification because we wanted it gluten-free so people can eat it, or non-GMO or organic. So I think that earlier on in the journey, I was very, very product focused. Back in those days as well, in 2014, I think social media and DTC weren't as prevalent, right? So how do you share that narrative? How do you tell that story? I think it's very different then from when it is, now or even just 2 years ago. And so earlier on in the journey, a lot of the focus was spent on in-store demos, where I had the ability to really connect with consumers by, sharing with them my passion for the products, and a lot of that, right? So that they understand why, the product is what it is. Or maybe, earlier on, at that time, people weren't even familiar with things like Pad See Ew, a white Thai noodle dish, or, the laksa noodle, which is a very Singaporean dish. A spaghetti-shaped rice noodle is constantly being pronounced as Laska noodles because they think it's spelled more like Alaska. So I definitely spent a lot more of my earlier years educating consumers just about the product. But I definitely feel that, with so many wonderful new brands coming onto the market in the last few years, and such a great explosion and growth of all these innovative, wonderful Asian products, we can now focus more on other aspects of it, on the narrative slightly more differently, and on the brand. So that's what that's how we've kind of shifted in the last few years compared to when I first launched the business.
Well said. Thank you very much. It's very interesting how the brand and the marketing and everything, it also have to fit with the time and the philosophy of the owner of the company too. So every single product, marketing, branding is so unique for each company. Victoria, what about you?
I've always taken an informal approach to branding, which is not what they would teach you in business school, but it's what I've been doing because to me, branding or branding for Ice Cream Jubilee, it's an emotion, and it's a personal emotion that each customer has with their experience from Ice Cream Jubilee. I think one of the challenges that I face when I think about our brand is I want somebody who, the person who always orders vanilla ice cream and always has since they were a kid, to enjoy it as much as the person who wants the mango habanero spicy ice cream that we're only going to have for 2 weeks. And I want both people to come every week to try something new or try the same thing every single time. So what does that brand mean to them? It just comes down to joy, comfort, and reliability. And I think that we achieved that reliability in being voted best ice cream in Washington, D.C. 7 years in a row, and getting national recognition for, in People magazine for the creativity, but also my personal journey, career journey, and then also our creative flavors.
Fascinating story. So now we're moving into the next set of questions that would be kind of like the emotional part of your journey into your enterprise. And that is, number one, was there any takeoff moment, meaning all of a sudden the timing is right, you just sell like crazy, or is it a gradual growth? In your case, Jing, what was your assessment of when was there any of that takeoff moment, or is it a slow growth?
I think it was a bit of both, and I think it's consistently been like that, up and down, up and down. Yeah, every kind of period of success has been followed by challenges and vice versa. The first time we launched on Kickstarter, we did quite well, and that was through me just emailing every single person I knew in my life, and cold emailing editors and writers. And so we managed to get some press coverage, which allowed the campaign to go viral. So we had a really great kind of set of, initial 3,000 customers that we were, a base that we could grow from. And those initial customers were extremely loyal and, told all their friends. And so word of mouth was a tremendous driver for us. And I think people really, and that's where the storytelling came in again, because when people heard our story, they were very willing to repeat it to their friends and family. And so it became about more than just a sauce. It became about, really changing people's minds about Chinese food and spreading that gospel. And, but as I mentioned, we were extremely resource constrained for the first 1.5 to 2 years. And so we didn't have the funds to, advertise or, acquire customers through any other paid channels. So it was a bit slow. It was still like 20% month over month, but it was kind of steady. As a small base, so it was steady. And then in April of last year, when lockdown happened and people were at home cooking more than ever, I think that's when our sales really started to take off. And we had one particular media article in the New York Times that sold us out of like 5 months of inventory overnight. And so that was kind of like the craziest moment of like, ecstasy and joy at like having, so much demand, and then also just extreme stress and, trying to figure out how to fulfill those orders because our factory was shut down, global logistics challenges. But since then, I think we've since that moment, last April, I think we've definitely been on a much faster growth trajectory. So we ended up last year 1,000% growth over our first year. Yeah, but yeah, it's never been smooth sailing.
Overwhelming, overwhelming. So with the Chinese word on the word crisis is made up by problem, you know, a challenge and an opportunity. So it sounds like that, but we also should be careful when we talk about that because many people suffer during the crisis. And so how about Karen and Susan? What is your story about growth?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that we're still in the gradual growing phase. So our company is 100% self-funded. And because of that, we have been really cautious about our growth and expansion approach. So it was really important for us to make sure that we've nailed the basics before we grew too quickly. However, recently we've been making changes to better position ourselves for more rapid growth. An example of this is with our production. So when we first started NOMAD, we actually were producing all of our dumplings by hand. So you can imagine we reached our capacity ceiling very quickly. And since then, we've been working towards automation. In fact, a few months ago, we invested in machinery that has increased our capacity by 7 times. So with this increased capacity and some recent conversations that we've been having with prospective partners, we're super excited that we're at the pivotal moment where we can switch our strategy from a gradual growth approach towards one that's a lot more ambitious. In fact, we plan to be nationwide by 2022.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, Nona Lim.
Yeah, you know, I think that growth of a business is never in a straight line, you know, however steep or non-steep it is, you know, I think it's always very uneven, right? So we've had a few good milestones along the way, like, you know, going national with Whole Foods being the brand to have brought in Asian, you know, fresh Asian noodles and really introducing Asian, fresh Asian and high quality Asian into Whole Foods was a huge milestone of ours. You know, over the years, we've won quite a lot of Sophie Awards. They're kind of an industry award by the Fancy Food Show. So those were all good milestones. But then there are ups and downs too, you know, like it's hilarious. Now you think back, like at the end of 2019, you know, Whole Foods selected us as a top 2020 trend, you know, with our cups because they're so convenient. But with the COVID, you know, that totally crashed. Because people don't need convenience. Everyone's stuck at home. They don't need those nutritious, you know, sip cups because they can do something totally different. And so we pivoted last year where what became really popular were our noodles because, you know, many consumers, they were craving the noodles that they would have in a restaurant that typically they would order in a restaurant and things that they wouldn't cook at home. But because of COVID, they really wanted to be able to recreate some of their favorite dishes. And so, you know, our noodles really took off, which helped us and which we're very grateful for. But, you know, as a refrigerated product, the logistics for e-commerce is a lot more challenging and also a lot more costly. So we're definitely not looking at the kind of 1,000% growth rate that I'm envious of. But at the same time, you know, because of the mega trend of Asian flavors and Asian food becoming really popular, not just among Asian Americans, but also among mainstream Americans. We're very excited to see that trend play out together with the whole trend of cooking at home, which is now here to stay because, you know, consumers are now willing and able to cook at home a lot more. And we just recently won a competition at Kroger. You know, it was a fresh and local competition across all categories, not just Asian ethnic products, but every category across deli, seafood, produce, you know, bakery, grocery, and we were one of the 5 brands out of over 1,000 brands that pitched. And we just won that. And so that gives us kind of national distribution at Kroger next year. And I think that that could be another kind of key milestone and takeoff moment. So we're very excited about that.
Excellent. So, you know, we have fun because time flies so fast. I'm making an executive decision to kind of wrap it up at this point. I think that we're going to talk about some of the lessons learned throughout the building process. And, but I do maybe should not though. There is one last question. I'd like to do, that is, before I even get to Victoria about that question, okay? So I just want to share with you, I'll be skipping 2 questions with one last question I'm gonna ask to be divided by each panelist for a little bit less than half of a minute, okay? But Victoria, I'd love to hear about that answer first on takeoff moment before I jump into the last question.
Sure. I mean, quickly, Ice Cream Jubilee has retail storefronts, three brick and mortar locations, which is very different than having only CPG, consumer packaged goods, wholesale business. Like, even if we build up an inventory, we will never sell out in one day or 1 week out of 5 months of inventory, because you can't pack that many people into a retail location. You know, you can only scoop so much ice cream. You can only swipe so many credit cards in a single day. You don't have a distributor buying it. So in comparison, our growth has been relatively gradual. However, we have had extreme moments of growth. In the this past January, I came up with 4 specialty flavors to celebrate the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It was historic in so many different ways. And people were, you know, tired of being cooped up in COVID. You know, they were celebrating in all sorts of personal ways. And that, you know, unique way of connecting to a consumer in a different way that amplified their celebration at home safely, that they could share virtually with other friends and family, really hit the nail on the head in connecting with our consumers. And we had a January that was 1,000% over the past January.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So last question, very fast. Jing Gao, where can we find your products?
You can find it on flybyjing.com and soon to be in Whole Foods in Mid-Atlantic, and Target in California, Costco in California, and a number of other stores. But you can check out all the stores on our website.
Excellent. NOMAD dumpling.
Yeah, so we're in about 100 stores in the Mid-Atlantic area. Our key partners includes Whole Foods, Foxtrot in DC, and Joker, an online platform in New York City. And of course, you can also purchase our dumplings at nomaddumplings.com.
Excellent. Nona?
Sure. Whole Foods and grocery stores nationwide. Use Instacart if you shop with Instacart, or Amazon.com, our website, nonalim.com, and also with a lot of other online grocery partners that you might be shopping at, like Fresh Direct, Good Eggs, Imperfect Foods, Sun Baskets, all of those.
Victoria?
Ice Cream Jubilee has 3 locations in the Washington, D.C. area, 2 in D.C., 1 in Arlington, Virginia. We're in Whole Foods in the Mid-Atlantic, that's D.C., Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. And also we ship nationwide direct to your doorstep through Goldbelly. You can find that link on icecreamjubilee.com and take 15% off with the code GoldBellyIt.
Thank you very much. This question concludes the panel. By this time, I'd like to ask Louisa to please close the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Milan. I really appreciate you directing this panel. I've learned so much. I feel like I know you all personally now. I was already a fan of all of your products, but I mean, after hearing your stories, it really just makes it personal. And I know that that's a tagline that Jing puts on her products. You know, it's personal, and you gained a loyal customer from me for life. I think that everyone in the audience can say the same, and we'll singing your praises to our friends and family as well. So thank you for that. Additionally, all of our panelists, for you participants, have agreed to provide some discount codes for you to sample their products at home. And those will be coming to you in an email after this. So check for that either tomorrow or the following day for those discount codes to try those. And I'd just like to share my screen for a couple last minute add-ons for all of you. So there's a lot on here, but again, don't rush for your pens. This will all be divulged for you in an email. As the panelists mentioned, here are their websites, so you can go and check them out directly. Thank you, Victoria, Nona, Jing, and Susan and Karen for your time tonight. This was amazing. I would also just like to note score.org to everyone in the audience who is maybe thinking about starting a business, in the process, or anywhere along the way. They are the largest network of free volunteer small business mentors in the nation. They provide free workshops and webinars, as well as mentoring capabilities. So they are awesome, and they're friends of the museum. So I want to make sure that we tell you about them today as well. And then thank you again to Ting Chu and James Chu at Evergreen Enterprises. They do sponsor this Women Entrepreneur Series at the Chinese American Museum here in DC. Thank you again, Milan, and the rest of the panel, and everyone in the audience. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.